The morning mist clung to the ancient stones of Valdoria Castle, like secrets that refused to be spoken aloud. Princess Elena stood at her chamber window, watching the sun struggle to penetrate the grey veil that shrouded the kingdom's capital. Her reflection stared back from the glass, auburn hair perfectly arranged, emerald eyes that betrayed nothing of the turmoil within, and the composed expression she'd mastered over 23 years of royal training. "Your Highness," came the soft voice of her lady-in-waiting Mira from behind, "your father requests your presence in the throne room. The delegation from Astoria has been sighted on the horizon." Eleanor's fingers tightened imperceptibly on the windowsill. The Astorians. After months of careful diplomatic correspondence, they were finally here to discuss the marriage alliance that could end decades of border skirmishes between their kingdoms. More importantly, they carried with them Crown Prince Marcus, the man her father intended for her to marry, though they had never met. "Tell His Majesty I'll be there momentarily," Elena replied, her voice steady despite the familiar tension beginning to coil in her chest. She recognized the warning signs, the slight tremor in her hands, the way her heartbeat seemed to echo in her ears, the peculiar tingling sensation that started at the base of her spine. "Not now," she commanded herself silently, employing the meditation techniques her grandmother had taught her years ago. Control. Always control. 20 minutes later, Eleanor descended the grand staircase leading to the throne room, her burgundy velvet gown trailing behind her like liquid wine. The great hall buzzed with courtiers, nobles, and advisors, all craning their necks for the first glimpse of the foreign delegation. King Aldric of Valdoria sat upon his throne, a man whose silver beard and weathered face spoke of 4 decades of rule. His eyes found Elena's as she approached, and she saw both pride and concern reflected there. "Ah, my daughter," he said as she curtsied before him, "are you prepared for what today may bring?" Eleanor straightened, meeting his gaze directly. "I am, father. For Valdoria, I am ready for anything." The massive oak doors at the far end of the hall groaned open, and a herald's voice boomed, "His Royal Highness, Crown Prince Marcus of Astoria, and the distinguished delegation of the Northern Kingdom." The procession that entered was impressive. A dozen knights in gleaming armor bearing the silver wolf banner of Astoria, followed by advisors in rich blue and silver robes. But Elena's attention was immediately captured by the man who led them. Crown Prince Marcus was taller than she had expected, with dark hair that caught the light from the tall windows, and piercing blue eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His bearing spoke of both royal training and battlefield experience, and when his gaze swept the assembled court before settling on her, Elena felt an unexpected flutter in her stomach. He approached the throne with confident strides, his cape flowing behind him, and bowed precisely as protocol demanded. "Your Majesty," his voice carried easily across the silent hall, "I bring greetings from my father, King Roderick of Astoria, and gratitude for your gracious invitation to discuss the future of our 2 great kingdoms." King Aldric rose from his throne. "Prince Marcus, you are most welcome in Valdoria. May I present my daughter, Princess Elena, heir to the throne and the light of our kingdom." As Marcus turned to her, Elena felt the familiar sensation intensify. The tingling was spreading up her spine now, and her vision seemed to sharpen with an almost painful clarity. She could see every detail of his face, the small scar above his left eyebrow, the way his eyes seemed to assess and appreciate her simultaneously, the genuine smile that softened what might otherwise have been a stern expression. "Your Highness," Marcus said, taking her offered hand and bowing over it with perfect courtesy, "your reputation for both wisdom and beauty precedes you, though I confess the reality exceeds even the most generous descriptions I received." Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks, both from the compliment and from the dangerous warmth that his touch sent racing through her system. "You flatter me, Your Highness. I hope your journey from Astoria was pleasant despite the recent storms. Indeed, though I suspect any hardships of travel pale in comparison to the complexities of the negotiations ahead." His eyes held hers for a moment longer than strict etiquette required, and Elena found herself wondering if he too felt the strange electricity that seemed to crackle between them. The formal presentations continued for another hour, but Elena found her attention wandering despite her best efforts. Every time Prince Marcus spoke, every time he laughed at some courtier's jest, every time his eyes found hers across the crowded hall, the strange sensations in her body intensified. Her grandmother's warnings echoed in her mind. The bloodline gift awakens strongest in times of great emotion or mortal danger. You must never let your guard down, child. The consequences could be catastrophic. As the evening feast was announced, and the court began to move toward the great dining hall, Elena excused herself momentarily, slipping into a small alcove behind a tapestry where she could gather her composure. Her breathing was shallow, her heart racing, and the tingling sensation had spread to her fingertips. "Princess," the voice was concerned, masculine and far too close. Elena spun to find Prince Marcus standing just outside the alcove, his expression genuinely worried. "I noticed you seemed unsettled. Are you quite well?" "I'm perfectly fine," she said quickly, perhaps too quickly, just overwhelmed by the occasion. Marcus stepped closer, and Elena caught the scent of leather, pine, and something uniquely him. "Forgive me if I'm overstepping, but you don't seem like someone who is easily overwhelmed by court functions. In fact, you strike me as someone who faces challenges head-on." Despite her growing panic, Elena found herself smiling. "Caio claimed to know me already, Your Highness. We've only just met." "True," he conceded, his own smile warm and surprisingly intimate in the shadowed alcove. "But I've been watching you since I arrived. The way you observe everything, the way the courtiers defer to your judgment even when speaking to your father, the way you carry yourself. You're no delicate flower, Princess Elena. You're a force to be reckoned with." The compliment sent another wave of dangerous warmth through her system, and Elena knew she was reaching a critical point. I should return to the feast. My absence will be noted." She moved to step past him, but Marcus gently caught her arm. The contact sent what felt like lightning through her entire body, and she gasped involuntarily. "Elena," he said softly, using her name without title for the first time, "whatever is troubling you, you don't have to face it alone. If this marriage alliance is to succeed, we need to trust each other." For a moment, Elena wavered on the edge of a precipice. She could tell him everything, about the family secret, about the strange genetic legacy that made her different from other royals, about the terrible burden of constantly controlling herself. But then she remembered her duty, her kingdom, and the delicate negotiations that hung in the balance. "You're right," she said finally, managing to pull away gently. "We do need to trust each other, and I trust that you'll understand when I say that some burdens are mine alone to carry, at least for now." Marcus studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "For now, then. But Elena, may I call you that? When you're ready to share those burdens, I hope you'll remember that strong shoulders can carry more than weak ones alone." As they walked together toward the Great Hall, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that her carefully ordered world was about to change forever. And deep inside, in the place where her grandmother's warnings lived alongside her own desperate hopes, she wondered if that change might be exactly what she'd been waiting for all her life. Sersin Fa Sabita Chapter 2, Dangerous Currents. The Great Hall of Valdoria Castle had been transformed for the welcome feast, with hundreds of candles casting dancing shadows across the stone walls, adorned with centuries-old tapestries depicting the kingdom's victories. Elena sat at the high table between her father and Prince Marcus, acutely aware of every movement the Asturian prince made beside her. The rich aromas of roasted venison, honey-glazed fowl and spiced wine filled the air, but Elena found her appetite diminished by the constant effort of maintaining control over the strange sensations coursing through her body. "Your castle is magnificent," Marcus was saying to King Aldric, though Elena noticed his attention kept drifting to her. "The craftsmanship in the Great Hall alone speaks to generations of skilled artisans. Built by my great-great-grandfather," King Aldric replied with evident pride. He believed a kingdom's strength was reflected in the permanence of its structures. "Built for centuries, not decades," he used to say. Elena forced herself to engage in the conversation. "Prince Marcus, I'm curious about Asturia's approach to the grain shortages that have affected both our kingdoms this season. Your father's letters mentioned innovative irrigation techniques." Marcus turned toward her fully, and Elena steeled herself against the impact of his direct attention. "Yes, our engineers have developed a system of canals that diverts water from the northern mountain streams. It's increased our harvest yields by nearly 30%. He paused, studying her face. "But I suspect you already knew that from the intelligence reports your advisors undoubtedly compiled." Elena felt a smile tug at her lips, despite her inner turmoil. "Perhaps I did. I wanted to see if you would share information freely or guard your kingdom's innovations, like military secrets. And your conclusion, Your Highness." There was amusement in his voice, but also something deeper, respect. That you're either very confident in Astoria's position, or you genuinely believe in the potential for our kingdoms to benefit each other rather than simply compete. Both, actually. Marcus lifted his wine goblet in a small salute. To kingdoms that build each other up rather than tear each other down. Eleanor raised her own goblet, their fingers brushing as the glasses touched. The contact sent another jolt through her system, stronger this time, and she saw Marcus's eyes widen slightly. Had he felt it too, or was he simply reacting to her sharp intake of breath? "Princess Elena," came a voice from across the table. Lord Garrett, one of her father's oldest advisors, was leaning forward with the slightly aggressive posture he adopted when he disapproved of something. "Perhaps you could enlighten Prince Marcus about our own agricultural innovations. The terraced farms in the eastern provinces have been quite successful." Elena recognized the challenge in his tone. Lord Garrett had been vocal in his opposition to the marriage alliance, believing Valdoria should maintain its independence at all costs. "Of course," she replied smoothly, "though I think Prince Marcus would be more interested in our military engineering, the new fortifications along the Thornbrook Pass, for instance." She saw the subtle tightening around Marcus's eyes. The Thornbrook Pass was strategically crucial, the main route between their kingdoms and the source of several recent border disputes. By mentioning it, she was testing whether he would react defensively or remain diplomatic. "Ah, yes," Marcus said carefully. "I'd heard rumors of construction in that region. I hope it's not intended to impede legitimate trade between our peoples." "Only to impede those with illegitimate intentions," Elena replied, matching his diplomatic tone while delivering an unmistakable message. The tension at the table was palpable now, with both kingdoms' representatives watching the exchange carefully. Eleanor felt the familiar warning signs intensifying. Her heart was racing, her skin felt hypersensitive, and there was a strange taste in her mouth, like copper and electricity. "Breathe," she commanded herself. "Control the situation before it controls you." "Perhaps," she continued, her voice taking on the authoritative tone she used in council meetings, "we should discuss how to transform the Thornbrook Pass from a point of contention into a symbol of cooperation. Joint patrols, shared customs stations, mutual benefit from increased trade." Marcus studied her for a long moment, and Elena could practically see his mind working. Finally, he smiled, not the polite court smile he'd been wearing, but something genuine and appreciative. "Now that," he said, "is the kind of innovative thinking that could reshape the entire relationship between our kingdoms." The crisis was defused, but Elena realized she was trembling slightly. She reached for her wine goblet to steady herself, but misjudged the distance in her heightened state, and knocked it over instead. The rich red wine spread across the white tablecloth like blood, and several courtiers gasped. "Oh!" Elena exclaimed, mortified by her unusual clumsiness. She reached for a napkin to stop the spreading stain, but Marcus was already there, his large hands efficiently containing the spill with his own napkin. "No harm done," he said quietly. His voice meant only for her ears. "Are you certain you're feeling well, Elena? You seem tense." The concern in his voice, the way he said her name, the warmth of his hands so close to hers, it all combined into a perfect storm of emotional intensity. Elena felt something shift inside her, a sensation like ice cracking on a spring lake, and panic flared through her system. "Excuse me," she said, rising abruptly from her chair. I'll return momentarily." She moved toward the side door that led to the castle's private corridors, aware that her exit was causing a stir, but unable to stop herself. Behind her, she heard her father making smooth excuses about the excitement of the day, but her focus was entirely on reaching privacy before something catastrophic happened. The stone corridor was blessedly cool and empty. Elena pressed her back against the wall, fighting for control as the sensations intensified. Her vision was sharpening to an almost painful degree. She could see individual dust motes floating in the torchlight, could make out the tiny imperfections in the stone walls, could hear conversations from the great hall with impossible clarity. "Elena?" The voice was soft, concerned, and entirely too close. She opened eyes she hadn't realized she'd closed to find Marcus standing in the corridor entrance, his expression genuinely worried. "You followed me," she said unnecessarily. "You looked like you were going to collapse," he replied, stepping closer. "I was concerned you might be ill." "I'm not ill," she said quickly. This is all very overwhelming." Marcus studied her face in the flickering torchlight. You keep saying that, but I don't think it's the negotiations or even our first meeting that's troubling you. There's something else, isn't there? Something you're afraid to tell me. Eleanor felt trapped between her duty to her kingdom and a growing desire to trust this man who seemed to see through her carefully constructed facades. Marcus, there are things about royal bloodlines that... She was interrupted by the sound of running footsteps and shouting from the direction of the great hall. Both she and Marcus turned toward the noise, and Elena's enhanced hearing picked up words that made her blood run cold. Attack, and assassins, and protect the prince. Without thinking, Elena grabbed Marcus's arm. This way, she said urgently, pulling him deeper into the corridor. There's a passage that leads to my father's study. We'll be safer there. They ran through the winding passages, Elena's intimate knowledge of the castle's layout guiding them through routes that few others knew. Behind them, the sounds of conflict grew louder, the clash of steel, shouts of pain, the heavy footfalls of armored men in pursuit. They reached the hidden entrance to King Aldric's private study, and Elena pressed the concealed lever that opened the panel. They slipped inside, just as the sound of footsteps echoed in the corridor they'd just vacated. The study was dark, except for the dying embers in the fireplace, and Elena moved quickly to bar the door, while Marcus checked the windows for escape routes. They could hear muffled voices in the corridor outside, men speaking in accented common, definitely not Valdorian. How many of your people knew about tonight's feast? Elena whispered. Only my closest advisors and the guards, Marcus replied grimly. This was planned by someone with inside knowledge of both courts. Elena nodded, her mind racing despite the chaos of sensations still coursing through her body. Actually, the immediate danger seemed to be helping her focus, channeling the strange energy into practical concerns. We need to reach the armory, she decided. There are weapons there, and it's the most defensible position in this wing of the castle. Can you get us there without being seen? Elena was about to answer when they heard the distinctive sound of the hidden door mechanism being activated. Someone else knew about this entrance. They had perhaps seconds before discovery. Elena made a decision that would change everything. Grabbing Marcus's hand, she looked directly into his eyes and said, Marcus, whatever happens next, whatever you see or think you understand, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? He didn't hesitate. Yes. The panel began to slide open, revealing armed figures in dark clothing. Elena felt the change beginning, her senses sharpening beyond human limits, strength flowing through her muscles like fire through her veins, reflexes quickening to supernatural speed. Her grandmother's warnings echoed distantly, but they were drowned out by a fiercer imperative. Protect what matters. The assassins burst into the room just as Elena's transformation reached its peak, and she threw herself forward with inhuman speed and strength, determined to keep Marcus safe, no matter the cost to her carefully guarded secret. Chapter 3. Secrets Unveiled. The first assassin through the door never saw Elena coming. Moving with fluid grace that defied human limitations, she struck him with the heel of her palm, sending him crashing into the stone wall with bone-crushing force. The second attacker barely had time to raise his sword before Elena was upon him, moving faster than Marcus's eyes could follow. She twisted away from the blade with impossible flexibility, grabbed the man's wrist, and applied pressure that made him drop his weapon with a scream of pain. Marcus stood frozen, not from fear but from sheer amazement. The elegant princess, who had seemed overwhelmed by a dinner conversation, was now moving like a force of nature, her auburn hair streaming behind her as she dispatched trained killers with terrifying efficiency. Her eyes, when they caught the firelight, seemed to glow with an inner luminescence that was distinctly inhuman. A crossbow bolt whistled through the air where Elena's head had been a split second before. She had somehow sensed it coming and ducked without even looking, then launched herself across the room in a single bound that covered 15 feet. Her fingers found pressure points on the crossbowman's neck, and he collapsed unconsciously to the floor. "The window!" Marcus shouted, finally breaking free from his stunned paralysis. More footsteps were echoing in the corridor, and they could hear the assassins coordinating their search. Elena spun toward him, and Marcus caught his breath. Her face was still beautiful, still recognizably hers, but everything was heightened, her features sharper, her movements predatory, her presence radiating a power that made the air itself seem to vibrate. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that resonated in his chest. There are at least a dozen more in the castle, she said, her enhanced hearing picking up conversations throughout the building. They've separated into 3 groups, one hunting us, one securing the Great Hall, and one heading for my father. Eleanor, Marcus said carefully, stepping closer despite every instinct that told him he was in the presence of something beyond human understanding. What are you? For a moment, vulnerability flickered across her transformed features. I'm still me, she said quietly. I'm still the woman you were getting to know. I'm just more than you thought. Before Marcus could respond, the hidden door exploded inward as someone applied force to the mechanism. 3 more assassins poured into the room, these ones clearly expecting resistance. They moved with professional coordination, spreading out to avoid giving Elena a single target. Stay behind me, Elena commanded, and there was such authority in her voice that Marcus found himself obeying without question. The lead assassin spoke in heavily accented Common. Princess Elena of Valdoria, you will come with us. The prince dies here, but you have value alive. Interesting, Elena replied, circling slowly as the 3 men mirrored her movement. So this isn't random violence. Someone wants me specifically and wants Marcus dead. That suggests our marriage alliance threatens someone powerful enough to infiltrate both our courts. Marcus drew his sword, an ornate ceremonial weapon but still sharp steel. Elena, we need to reach the armory. Can you clear us a path? I can do better than that, she said, and Marcus heard something feral in her voice that should have frightened him, but instead sent an unexpected thrill through his system. I can make sure they never threaten anyone again. What followed was less like a fight and more like a dance of controlled violence. Eleanor moved through the 3 assassins like water flowing around stones, striking with precise force that left each man alive but thoroughly incapacitated. Her movements were so fluid that she seemed to be everywhere at once, deflecting a blade thrust while simultaneously striking another attacker's nerve center, spinning away from a crossbow bolt while her backhand sent the bowman stumbling into the wall. Within moments, all 3 assassins were on the floor, groaning but breathing. We need to move, Eleanor said, and Marcus noticed that her breathing wasn't even elevated despite the intense combat. More are coming, and some of them might be skilled enough to pose a real threat. They slipped out of the study through a concealed passage that Elena revealed behind a bookshelf. As they moved through the narrow stone corridor, Marcus finally found his voice. How long? He asked simply. Elena didn't pretend to misunderstand. Since I was 16. It manifested during a particularly intense council meeting where several lords were questioning my fitness to eventually rule. The stress triggered something in my bloodline that had been dormant. Bloodline? My grandmother called it the old gift. She said it appeared in the royal line every few generations, always in times of great need. Eleanor paused at a junction in the passage, listening intently. She was the last to have it before me. She taught me to control it, to hide it, to never let anyone see what I truly was. And what are you truly? Marcus's voice held no fear, only curiosity, and something that might have been awe. Eleanor turned to look at him, and in the dim light filtering through the passage, her eyes definitely held that strange luminescence. Enhanced, stronger, faster, more perceptive than any human has a right to be. My grandmother said we were bred for war generations ago, when the kingdom faced threats that ordinary people couldn't handle. They emerged into another corridor, this one leading toward the castle's main armory. Elena held up a hand for silence, then whispered, 6 men ahead. They're guarding the armory entrance. Can you? Not without killing them, Elena interrupted grimly. These aren't court-trained assassins. They're soldiers, probably mercenaries. They'll be harder to incapacitate without permanent damage. Marcus was quiet for a moment, weighing their options. Elena, if we're going to survive this night, and if our kingdoms are going to survive what comes after, I need you to trust me as much as you're asking me to trust you. What do you mean? Marcus smiled, and Elena saw something dangerous and competent in his expression that she hadn't noticed before. I mean that I've been hiding things too. Not supernatural abilities, but skills that princes aren't supposed to possess. My father sent me to train with the mountain rangers when I was 17. Unconventional warfare, infiltration, assassination techniques. He wanted his heir to understand war from every angle, not just the pretty ceremonial version. Elena stared at him. You're not just a diplomatic prince, and you're not just an enhanced princess with supernatural abilities. Marcus drew a slim dagger from his boot, clearly not ceremonial. We're both more than we appear. The question is, are we going to be more together than we could be apart? Before Elena could answer, the sound of steel on steel echoed from the direction they'd come. Someone had discovered the unconscious assassins in the study and raised an alarm. "Decision time," Elena said. Marcus grinned, and Elena realized she was seeing the real man for the first time. Together, then. "But Elena, after tonight, no more secrets between us. If we're going to face whatever's coming, we face it with complete honesty." "Agreed," Elena said, extending her hand. When their fingers touched, Elena felt that electric sensation again, but this time she didn't try to control it. Instead, she let it flow between them, and saw Marcus's eyes widen as he felt it too. "Now that," he said softly, "is definitely not normal." "Nothing about tonight is going to be normal," Elena replied. "Ready to find out what we can accomplish when we stop pretending to be ordinary?" Marcus squeezed her hand once, then released it and moved toward the corridor where their enemies waited. "Lead the way, Your Extraordinariness." Despite everything, the danger, the revealed secrets, the chaos engulfing her carefully ordered world, Elena found herself smiling as she followed him into the shadows. As du weißt, du magst, and Chapter 4. Alliance Forged in Fire. The armory corridor stretched before them like a gauntlet, lit by torches that cast dancing shadows on the ancient stones. Elena could hear the 6 guards clearly now, their breathing, their whispered conversations, even the slight rustle of leather as they shifted position. Her enhanced senses painted a detailed picture. 2 crossbowmen positioned behind overturned tables, 4 swordsmen spread across the corridor's width, all facing the direction Elena and Marcus would approach from. "Professional formation," Marcus murmured, studying the scene from their concealed position. "Overlapping fields of fire, no blind spots. These aren't castle infiltrators, they're military." Elena nodded, her mind racing through tactical possibilities. "The crossbowmen are the primary threat. If I can reach them before they can reload, the swordsmen become manageable. What if we don't approach from the direction they expect?" Marcus pointed to a narrow maintenance shaft that ran along the ceiling. "Can you fit through there?" Elena assessed the opening with her enhanced vision. "Barely. But Marcus, even with my abilities, taking on 6 trained soldiers simultaneously is risky. If something goes wrong, then we make sure nothing goes wrong." Marcus's voice carried the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to high-stakes planning. "You take the crossbowmen from above, while I create a distraction from ground level. They'll focus on the obvious threat while you eliminate the real danger." "That puts you in the most exposed position," Elena protested. Marcus smiled grimly. "Trust me, I'm harder to kill than I look." Before Elena could object further, the sound of marching feet echoed from both ends of the corridor. Their window of opportunity was closing rapidly. "Go!" Marcus commanded, and something in his voice made Elena move without further argument. She flowed into the maintenance shaft with liquid grace, her enhanced flexibility allowing her to navigate the tight space silently. Through gaps in the stone, she could see Marcus preparing himself, checking weapons and taking slow, measured breaths. The calm competence he displayed was so different from the diplomatic prince she'd met just hours ago that she wondered how many other surprises this night would reveal. Elena reached a position directly above the crossbowman, just as Marcus stepped into view at the far end of the corridor. The guards immediately focused on him, crossbows swinging toward this new threat. "Prince Marcus of Astoria," called one of the swordsmen in heavily accented common, "you have caused us great inconvenience. Surrender now and your death will be quick." "I'm afraid I have other plans," Marcus replied, his voice carrying easily down the corridor. "But I'm curious. Who's paying you enough to risk war between 2 kingdoms? Elena used the distraction to remove one of the ceiling stones silently, creating an opening large enough for her to drop through. She could see both crossbowmen clearly now, their attention fixed on Marcus. "Wars create opportunities for those wise enough to exploit them," the lead swordsman replied. "Your marriage alliance threatens certain business interests." "Ah," Marcus said, and Elena heard genuine understanding in his voice. "The grain merchants. I wondered when they'd make their move." The pieces clicked into place in Elena's mind. The grain shortages affecting both kingdoms hadn't been natural disasters. They'd been artificially created to inflate prices and create dependency. A marriage alliance that included shared agricultural innovations would threaten that monopoly. "Enough talk," snarled one of the crossbowmen, raising his weapon toward Marcus. Eleanor dropped. She landed directly between the two crossbowmen, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to strike both simultaneously. Her left hand found the first archer's wrist, applying pressure that made him drop his weapon with a cry of pain, while her right elbow connected with the second archer's solar plexus, doubling him over. The swordsman spun toward this new threat, but Marcus was already in motion. He threw his ceremonial dagger with deadly accuracy, the blade burying itself in the lead swordsman's shoulder. Then he drew his sword and charged, his movements displaying the fluid competence of someone with extensive combat training. Elena vaulted over the overturned table, grabbing one of the dropped crossbows and firing it into the leg of a swordsman who was trying to flank Marcus. The man dropped with a scream, clutching his wounded limb. "Behind you!" Marcus shouted. Eleanor spun to see one of the incapacitated crossbowmen reaching for a backup weapon. A small hand crossbow loaded with what looked like a poisoned dart. She moved faster than human eyes could follow, reaching the man before he could fire and applying a pressure hold that rendered him unconscious. The remaining swordsmen found themselves facing two opponents who were clearly far more dangerous than anticipated. One tried to run, but Marcus intercepted him with a tackle that sent both men crashing into the stone wall. The final attacker swung desperately at Elena, who simply wasn't where his blade expected her to be. She flowed around his strike like smoke, then struck two precise pressure points that left him paralyzed but conscious. Within moments, the corridor was secure. Elena and Marcus stood amid the defeated enemies, both breathing hard but uninjured. Elena realized that the strange energy that had been building in her system all evening had finally found its outlet, leaving her feeling more centered and calm than she had in hours. "Well," Marcus said, wiping his sword clean before sheathing it. "That was educational." "The grain merchants," Elena said, kneeling beside the wounded leader to check his injuries. "They've been manipulating both our kingdom's food supplies to create artificial scarcity, and our marriage alliance threatens their control," Marcus agreed. "Joint agricultural innovations, shared resources, coordinated trade policies, it would break their monopoly completely." Eleanor helped the wounded man sit up, her enhanced senses telling her that his injuries were painful but not life-threatening. "Who hired you?" she asked directly. The man glared at her with defiant eyes. "Go ahead, kill me. Others will take my place." "I'm not going to kill you," Elena said calmly. "But if you don't start talking, I'm going to let my enhanced healing abilities work on you very slowly, while we wait for the king's interrogators to arrive." Marcus raised an eyebrow at this creative threat, but said nothing. The mercenary's eyes widened slightly. "Enhanced? You're one of the old bloodlines? The Valdorian royal line has unique characteristics," Eleanor confirmed. "Characteristics that become very inconvenient for people who threaten my kingdom or my allies." "The Merchant Council of Drakmor," the man said quickly. "They control grain distribution across 5 kingdoms. Your alliance would cost them millions in lost profits." "Drakmor," Marcus repeated grimly. "That explains the coordination. They have contacts in courts throughout the region." Elena stood, helping the wounded mercenary to his feet with surprising gentleness. "And now we know who our real enemy is." As if summoned by her words, the sound of armor and running feet echoed from both ends of the corridor. But this time, Elena's enhanced hearing identified the approaching forces as friendly, Valdorian guards, and, surprisingly, Asturian soldiers working together. "Your Highness," Captain Rodriguez of the Valdorian Royal Guard rounded the corner at a run, relief evident on his weathered face. "Thank the ancestors, you're safe." Behind him came a man in Asturian colors, older, scarred with the bearing of a career soldier. "Prince Marcus," he said with obvious relief, "your father will have my head if I let anything happen to you on foreign soil." "Captain Thorne," Marcus replied warmly, "I assume you and Captain Rodriguez have been comparing notes." "Aye, Your Highness. The attacks were coordinated, simultaneous strikes in both kingdoms. But once we realized our princes were together and likely safe, we combined forces to search the castle." Eleanor felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "My father?" "Safe, Your Highness," Captain Rodriguez assured her, barricaded in the throne room with the surviving delegates from both kingdoms. The attackers seemed more interested in separating you and Prince Marcus than in actually conquering the castle. "Because dead, we're martyrs who might inspire our kingdoms to unite against a common threat," Marcus said thoughtfully. "But captured, we could be used as leverage to prevent any alliance." Elena nodded. "The Merchant Council of Drakmor doesn't want war between our kingdoms. They want continued division that they can exploit. Captain Thorne frowned. Drakmor. That's ambitious of them, and dangerous. Which is why, Elena said, looking directly at Marcus, our marriage alliance just became more important than ever. Not just for trade benefits, but for mutual protection against an enemy that threatens both our kingdoms. Marcus met her gaze steadily. Are you proposing to me, Princess? Despite everything that had happened, Elena felt herself blush. I'm proposing a partnership, Prince Marcus. Political, military, and... She gestured at the defeated mercenaries around them. Whatever this turned out to be. This, Marcus said, stepping closer, turned out to be the most honest conversation two royals have probably had in decades. He took her hands in his, and Elena felt that electric current flow between them again. Elena of Valdoria, I accept your proposal. All of it. Captain Rodriguez cleared his throat diplomatically. Your Highnesses, perhaps we should continue this discussion in a more secure location? Elena looked around at the unconscious and wounded mercenaries, then at the man who had just agreed to bind his fate to hers, then at the combined forces of their two kingdoms working together in the corridor. Yes, she said, feeling more confident about the future than she had in years. We have a wedding to plan, and a war to prevent. As they walked together toward the throne room where their fathers waited, Elena realized that her carefully controlled life had been completely transformed in the space of a single evening. But walking beside Marcus, with her secret revealed and accepted, with their kingdom's guards working in harmony around them, she found that she wouldn't change a single moment of it. The real work was just beginning. Chapter 5. The Cost of Truth. The throne room of Valdoria Castle had been transformed into a war council chamber. Tables laden with maps, correspondence and intelligence reports filled the space where elegant court furniture had stood hours earlier. King Aldric sat in deep discussion with a distinguished older man, Elena recognized as King Roderick of Astoria, Marcus's father, who had apparently arrived with reinforcements shortly after the attacks began. Elena! King Aldric rose as she entered, his relief evident as he embraced his daughter. When the attacks began and you disappeared, I feared the worst. As did I, said King Roderick, a tall man with silver-streaked hair and eyes the same piercing blue as his son's. He studied Elena with obvious curiosity. Though from the reports I'm receiving, it seems my fears were misplaced. Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks, acutely aware that her enhanced abilities had undoubtedly been witnessed by multiple guards. Your Majesty, there are circumstances about tonight that require explanation. Indeed there are, King Aldric said, his tone carefully neutral. Captain Rodriguez's report was illuminating. Marcus stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Elena in a gesture that was both protective and supportive. Father, before we discuss anything else, I need you to know that Princess Elena saved my life tonight, multiple times. Whatever unusual capabilities she displayed, they were used in defense of our alliance. King Roderick's eyebrows rose. Unusual capabilities? Elena took a breath, steeling herself for what might be the most important conversation of her life. Your Majesty, the Valdorian royal bloodline carries certain enhancements. They manifest during times of extreme stress or danger, and they have been carefully hidden for generations. Enhancements, King Roderick repeated slowly. Increased strength, speed, reflexes, and sensory perception, Elena said, meeting his gaze directly. My grandmother called it the old gift, a legacy from ancestors who faced threats that ordinary humans could not handle. The throne room was silent except for the crackling of torches. Elena could hear heartbeats, breathing patterns, the rustle of fabric as people shifted uncomfortably. Finally, King Roderick spoke. Show me. Father, Marcus began, but his father held up a hand. Marcus, if I am to trust my son's life and my kingdom's future to this alliance, I need to understand exactly what we're allying with. King Roderick's voice was firm but not unkind. Princess Elena, I mean no disrespect, but extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Elena looked to her father, who nodded slowly. He has the right to know, daughter, especially given what we learned tonight about our enemies. Elena moved to the center of the room, acutely aware that everyone present was watching her. Captain Rodriguez had positioned a heavy oak table against the far wall, easily 300 pounds of solid wood and iron fittings. May I? Elena asked, gesturing toward the table. King Roderick nodded. Elena walked to the table, placed her hands underneath one edge and lifted. The massive piece of furniture rose into the air as if it weighed nothing more than a feather pillow. She held it steady for several seconds, then set it down gently without so much as disturbing the maps that lay on its surface. The assembled nobles and advisors murmured in amazement, but King Roderick's expression remained thoughtful rather than shocked. "Remarkable," he said. "And this ability has been hidden for how long?" "My grandmother's generation was the last to manifest it before me," Elena replied. "Nearly 50 years of secrecy." "Why reveal it now?" Marcus answered before Elena could speak. "Because tonight proved that our kingdoms face an enemy that uses deception and hidden resources. Fighting them with conventional means while hiding our own advantages would be strategically foolish." King Roderick smiled, the first time Elena had seen him display any warmth. "Spoken like a true strategist. Very well, Princess Elena. Your secret is safe with Astoria, and it will be an asset in the conflicts to come." Elena felt a wave of relief, but it was quickly tempered by her father's serious expression. "Which brings us to our immediate problem," King Aldrich said, indicating the documents spread across the tables. "The attacks tonight were not isolated incidents. We've received reports from 3 other kingdoms, similar coordinated strikes, all targeting rulers who were considering trade agreements that would threaten the Merchant Council of Drakmor." Elena moved to study the reports, her enhanced vision allowing her to read them quickly, even in the flickering torchlight. The Kingdom of Lyonesse lost half their royal guard in a midnight assault. Brennan's crown prince was nearly assassinated during a diplomatic reception, and Westmarch's queen barely escaped when poison was discovered in her wine. "All within the past month," Marcus added grimly. "The Merchant Council is moving against anyone who threatens their monopoly." "But why target our alliance specifically?" Elena asked. "Our kingdoms are strong, but we're not the largest threat to their operations." King Roderick exchanged a meaningful look with her father. "Because your alliance represents something more dangerous than economic competition, Princess. It represents the possibility of a united front." Elena felt pieces clicking into place in her mind. The other kingdoms, if they knew Valdoria and Astoria were working together against Drakmor, they might join us. "Exactly," King Aldrich confirmed. "A single kingdom challenging the Merchant Council can be isolated and crushed, but 5 or 6 kingdoms working in coordination, that becomes a genuine threat to their entire operation. Which is why," Marcus said slowly, "our marriage alliance needs to happen quickly, visibly, and with maximum diplomatic impact." Elena turned to stare at him. "You're suggesting we accelerate the wedding timeline?" "I'm suggesting we make it an event that draws representatives from every kingdom Drakmor has threatened," Marcus replied. "A summit disguised as a celebration. If we can get the right people in the same room, we can coordinate a response that the Merchant Council won't be able to stop." "A wedding as a declaration of war," Elena mused. "Unconventional, but brilliant." King Roderick nodded approvingly. "It has the advantage of being unexpected. Drakmor will be prepared for military responses or secret negotiations, but not for a public celebration that doubles as a strategic alliance." "How quickly can it be arranged?" Elena asked her father. "A proper royal wedding requires months of preparation," King Aldrich began, but Elena interrupted. "What about an improper royal wedding?" Marcus laughed, and Elena heard genuine delight in the sound. "I like the way you think, Princess. What did you have in mind?" Elena moved to the largest map, pointing to the border between their kingdoms, the ancient oak grove at Thornbrook Pass. "It's technically neutral ground, easily defensible, and has symbolic significance as the place where our kingdoms have historically settled disputes." "An outdoor ceremony," Marcus said thoughtfully. "Faster to organize, harder for enemies to infiltrate, and romantic enough to capture public imagination." 2 weeks, Elena decided. That's enough time to send invitations and arrange security, but not enough time for Drakmor to organize a proper counter-response. King Roderick studied the map carefully. The symbolism is powerful. 2 kingdoms united in the place that once divided them, and if we invite representatives from the threatened kingdoms as honored guests, we turn a wedding into a diplomatic revolution, Elena finished. "There's one more consideration," Marcus said quietly. "Elena, if we're going to do this, if we're going to make our marriage a symbol of resistance against Drakmor, then it needs to be real. Not just a political arrangement, but a genuine partnership." Elena met his gaze, aware that everyone in the room was listening. "Are you asking if I can love you, Marcus? I'm asking if you're willing to try. Because after tonight, after seeing you in action, after working with you as a true partner, Marcus stepped closer, taking her hands in his. I'm already halfway there myself. The electric sensation flowed between them again, stronger this time, and Eleanor realized it wasn't just her enhanced abilities reacting to stress. It was something deeper, a connection that felt both supernatural and entirely natural. Yes, she said simply, I'm willing to try. More than willing. Then it's settled, King Aldrich announced. A royal wedding in 2 weeks, with diplomatic implications that will reshape the balance of power across 6 kingdoms. Captain Rodriguez cleared his throat diplomatically. Your Majesties, if I may suggest, we'll need to begin security preparations immediately. Drakmor won't ignore a gathering of this significance. Agreed, King Roderick said, and we'll need to coordinate our intelligence networks. This wedding will be a target unlike anything we've faced before. Eleanor looked around the room at the faces of allies and advisors, at maps marking friendly and hostile territories, at the man who would soon be her husband standing beside her with unwavering support. 2 days ago, her biggest concern had been managing court politics and hiding her abilities. Now she was planning to use those abilities to help forge an alliance that could prevent a war. There's something else, she said, an idea forming in her mind. If we're going to make this wedding a symbol of strength, we should consider being completely honest about what we're offering our allies. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You mean reveal your abilities publicly? I mean demonstrate them. Show the other kingdoms that Valdoria brings more than just diplomatic promises to this alliance. Elena looked at her father, seeking permission for what she was about to propose. A display of strength that makes it clear we're not just another target for Drakmor to intimidate. King Aldrich was quiet for a long moment. That would change everything, Elena. Once that secret is public, there's no taking it back. Good, Elena said firmly. I'm tired of hiding what I am, and if we're going to fight an enemy that uses deception and hidden resources, maybe it's time to show them what we can do in the light. Marcus squeezed her hands, his smile proud and admiring. Have I mentioned that I'm falling in love with your strategic mind as much as everything else about you? Despite the gravity of their situation, Elena felt herself smile back. Save some romance for the actual wedding, Your Highness. As you command, Your Extraordinariness. As the assembled nobles and advisors began discussing logistics and security arrangements, Elena realized that her life had fundamentally changed in ways she was only beginning to understand. But looking at Marcus, feeling the strength of their growing partnership, she found herself excited about the future for the first time in years. The real adventure was just beginning. Chapter 6. Unexpected Allies. Dawn broke over Valdoria Castle with the crisp clarity that followed storms, and Elena stood in her private study reviewing intelligence reports that had arrived throughout the night. Her enhanced senses picked up the approach of familiar footsteps long before the soft knock came at her door. "Come in, Marcus," she called, not looking up from the documents spread across her desk. "How did you—" Marcus began as he entered, then stopped himself. "Right. Enhanced hearing." Elena smiled, finally looking up at him. He was dressed in practical traveling clothes rather than court finery, and she noted the subtle bulge of concealed weapons beneath his jacket. "Going somewhere?" "We're going somewhere," Marcus corrected, settling into the chair across from her desk. "I've had an interesting morning conversation with my father and yours. It seems we have potential allies, but they want to meet with us personally before committing to our cause." Elena leaned back in her chair, studying his expression. "Let me guess. They want to see the enhanced princess for themselves. Among other things." Marcus's tone was carefully neutral. "The Crown Prince of Lyonesse sent a coded message. He's willing to coordinate with our alliance, but only if he can verify that we have the capabilities to stand against Drakmor." "A reasonable request given what his kingdom went through," Elena conceded. "What did you tell him?" "That we'd meet him at the border inn between our kingdoms. Neutral ground, minimal security risk, and close enough to Thornbrook Pass that we can inspect the wedding site while we're there." Elena considered this, her mind automatically calculating risks and opportunities. "When?" "This afternoon. We can be there by evening if we leave within the hour." "Just the two of us?" Marcus grinned. "You sound disappointed. Were you hoping for a larger entourage?" "I was hoping for enough backup to ensure we don't end up as Drakmor's prisoners," Elena replied dryly. "But I suppose traveling light has its advantages." "Elena," Marcus said, his tone becoming more serious. "There's something else. Prince Adrian of Lyonesse specifically requested that you demonstrate your abilities. Apparently, word of last night's events has spread further than we expected." Elena felt a familiar tightness in her chest. Not the dangerous buildup of energy from the previous evening, but the old anxiety of exposure and judgment. "How much does he know?" "Enough to be intrigued rather than frightened," Marcus said gently. "His message suggested that Lyonesse has its own secrets, and that your revelation might make certain conversations possible that weren't before." "What kind of secrets?" "The kind we'll only learn by meeting with him." Marcus stood, extending his hand to her. "Elena, I know this feels like a risk, but if we're going to build a real alliance against Drakmor, we need to trust our potential allies with the truth." Elena took his offered hand, feeling that now familiar electric current flow between them. "And you're comfortable being allied with someone whose capabilities you don't fully understand yourself?" Marcus brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "I'm comfortable being allied with someone whose character I understand completely. The abilities are just an interesting bonus." Despite her concerns, Elena felt herself smiling. "Flatterer." "Shy strategist," Marcus corrected. "There's a difference." 2 hours later, they were riding through the countryside between Valdoria and Lyonesse, their horses covering ground at a steady pace that would bring them to the border inn by evening. Elena had chosen to ride side-saddle in deference to her traveling dress, but Marcus noticed that she controlled her mount with unconscious precision that suggested her enhanced abilities extended to perfect balance and coordination. "Tell me about Prince Adrian," Elena said as they crested a hill that offered a sweeping view of the valley below. "What kind of man are we meeting?" "Intelligent, pragmatic, and reportedly unshockable," Marcus replied. "He's ruled Lyonesse in all but name since his father's illness began 3 years ago. Their kingdom has a reputation for unconventional solutions to problems." "Unconventional how?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "They have the most effective intelligence network in the region. Information reaches Lyonesse faster than it reaches kingdoms twice their size, and they've survived 3 separate attempts at conquest by employing tactics that their enemies never seem to anticipate." Elena considered this. "You think they have enhanced individuals like me?" "I think they have something that gives them advantages other kingdoms don't possess," Marcus said carefully. "What that something is, we'll find out tonight." The Border Inn was a substantial building of local stone and timber, positioned at a crossroads that served travelers from 4 different kingdoms. As they approached, Elena's enhanced senses immediately identified multiple concealed observers, guards positioned to watch the roads and assess anyone approaching the inn. "We're expected," she murmured to Marcus as they dismounted. "And evaluated," Marcus agreed, helping her down from her horse with unnecessary but appreciated gallantry. Inside, the inn was warm and welcoming, with a great hearth crackling at one end of the common room and the rich aroma of roasted meat and fresh bread filling the air. Elena immediately spotted their contact, a man of perhaps 30 years, with dark hair and intelligent brown eyes, sitting alone at a corner table positioned to observe the entire room. Prince Adrian of Lyonesse rose as they approached, offering a bow that was respectful but not obsequious. "Your Highnesses," he said in a voice that carried the accent of the northern kingdoms, "thank you for accepting my invitation." "Prince Adrian," Marcus replied, returning the bow. "May I present Princess Elena of Valdoria?" Adrian's eyes met Elena's directly, and she caught something in his expression. Recognition, perhaps, or understanding. "Princess Elena, your reputation precedes you, though I suspect the most interesting aspects are not widely known." "That depends," Elena replied carefully, "on what you consider interesting." Adrian smiled, and Elena noticed that his canine teeth were slightly longer and sharper than normal. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private." He led them to a small private dining room on the inn's 2nd floor, where a meal had been prepared and wine waited on the table. Elena noted that Adrian had positioned himself where he could watch both the door and the windows, professional paranoia that matched her own heightened awareness. "Before we discuss alliances," Adrian said once they were seated, "I think we should address the question of what each of us brings to such an arrangement." "Agreed," Elena said. "What does Lyonesse offer?" "Information," Adrian replied immediately. "We know things about Drakmor that other kingdoms don't. Their organizational structure, their funding sources, their plans for territorial expansion. We also know about their recent recruitment activities. Marcus leaned forward. Recruitment? Enhanced individuals, Adrian said, watching Elena's reaction carefully. Drakmor has been quietly gathering people with unusual abilities, not naturally enhanced like certain royal bloodlines, but individuals who have been modified. Elena felt ice in her veins. Modified how? Alchemy. Surgical enhancement. Techniques that create abilities similar to yours, Princess, but at a terrible cost. Adrian's expression was grim. They're building an army of enhanced soldiers who feel no pain, show no mercy, and follow orders without question. That's impossible, Marcus said. The techniques to create such modifications don't exist. Adrian met his gaze steadily. They do now. Drakmor has been funding research for years, using resources stolen from the kingdoms they exploit. And they've had test subjects. What kind of test subjects? Elena asked, though she was afraid she already knew the answer. Political prisoners, captured soldiers, anyone whose disappearance wouldn't be immediately investigated. Adrian poured wine for each of them, his movements precise and controlled. Princess Elena, your natural abilities make you incredibly valuable as an ally, but they also make you an extremely high-priority target for capture. Elena felt the familiar energy beginning to build in her system, not from attraction this time, but from anger and fear. They want to study me. They want to replicate you, Adrian corrected, and they're close to succeeding. Marcus reached across the table to take Elena's hand, and she felt some of the dangerous energy dissipate at his touch. How do you know all this? He asked Adrian. Adrian smiled again, and this time Elena definitely noticed the elongated canines. Because Lioness has its own enhanced bloodline, Prince Marcus. We've been fighting modified humans for 2 years. What kind of enhancement? Elena asked directly. Enhanced night vision, improved hearing and smell, increased healing rate, and enhanced tracking abilities, Adrian replied matter-of-factly. My bloodline was bred for hunting, Princess Elena. Yours was bred for warfare. Together, we might actually have a chance against what Drakmor is creating. Elena stared at him, pieces clicking into place. The intelligence network. You're not using conventional spies. Enhanced senses make for very effective reconnaissance, Adrian confirmed. We can track individuals by scent, hear conversations from impossible distances, and see clearly in conditions that would blind normal humans. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. So our alliance wouldn't just be 3 kingdoms against Drakmor. It would be 3 enhanced bloodlines against an army of artificially modified soldiers. Precisely, Adrian said. And there's something else you should know. Drakmor isn't planning to wait for your wedding to make their next move. They're accelerating their timeline. Elena felt her heart rate spike. What do you mean? They're planning to attack the wedding ceremony itself, Adrian said grimly. Not to capture you this time, but to eliminate you publicly, and demonstrate that enhanced bloodlines can be defeated by their modified soldiers. The private dining room fell silent, except for the crackling of the fire in the small hearth. Elena realized that their carefully planned diplomatic wedding had just become something far more dangerous, a battlefield where the future of multiple kingdoms would be decided. Well, she said finally, I suppose that settles the question of whether we're ready for this alliance. Marcus squeezed her hand. The question is whether we're ready for war. Adrian raised his wineglass in a grim toast to unexpected allies and necessary battles. As they drank, Elena realized that her world had shifted once again, but this time she wasn't facing the unknown alone. Chapter 7. Gathering Storm. The ancient oak grove at Thornbrook Pass had stood for over 1,000 years, its massive trees forming a natural cathedral where countless ceremonies had been performed. As Elena walked through the dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy, she could feel the weight of history in this place and the weight of what was to come. The altar should be positioned here, she said, indicating a clearing where the largest oak stood, its trunk so wide that 10 people holding hands couldn't encircle it. It provides natural protection from 3 sides and clear sight lines to all approach routes. Marcus nodded, making notes on the detailed map they were creating for their security forces. Adrian's people have confirmed movement in the surrounding forests. Drakmor's advanced scouts arrived 2 days ago. How many? Elena asked, though her enhanced hearing had already detected the distant sounds of concealed camps. At least 50, possibly more, Adrian replied, emerging from the tree line with the silent grace that marked his enhanced bloodline. They're not trying particularly hard to hide. I think they want us to know they're there. Elena frowned. Psychological warfare. They want us nervous and off balance for the ceremony. It's working, Marcus said grimly. Half the invited dignitaries are reconsidering their attendance. King Brennan sent word this morning that he's delayed by urgent domestic matters. Brennan's afraid, Adrian observed. His kingdom barely survived their last encounter with Drakmor's forces. But Queen Lyanna of Westmarch is still coming, and she's bringing her entire royal guard. Eleanor felt a surge of respect for the distant queen. Westmarch was the smallest of the allied kingdoms, but Lyanna had a reputation for courage that bordered on recklessness. What about Prince Garrett of Ironhold? Confirmed, Adrian said with satisfaction. And he's bringing something special. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Such as? Ironhold's enhanced bloodline doesn't manifest in individuals, Adrian explained, settling against the trunk of a nearby oak. It manifests in their metalworking. They can create weapons and armor that are unusually effective against modified humans. Elena stared at him. How many enhanced bloodlines are there? More than you'd expect, fewer than we need, Adrian replied cryptically. The royal houses have been hiding their gifts for generations, but Drakmor's activities are forcing everyone into the open. Speaking of which, Marcus said, consulting his timepiece, our other ally should be arriving soon. Elena looked questioningly at him. Other ally? Someone Adrian suggested we invite. A specialist in dealing with artificially enhanced humans. Marcus's expression was carefully neutral. She has experience fighting Drakmor's modified soldiers. The sound of approaching horses reached Elena's enhanced hearing several minutes before the riders came into view. 3 figures emerged from the forest road, 2 guards flanking a woman who immediately commanded attention. She was perhaps 40 years old, with silver-streaked black hair and scars that spoke of extensive combat experience. When she dismounted and approached their group, Elena noticed that she moved with the controlled precision of someone accustomed to violence. Your Highnesses, the woman said, offering a bow that was respectful but perfunctory, I am Captain Sarah Blackwood, formerly of the Drakmor Merchant Guard. Elena felt every muscle in her body tense. Formerly? I resigned my commission when I discovered what they were doing to prisoners, Sarah replied bluntly. 3 years ago, I led a raid to rescue captured soldiers from a facility where Drakmor was conducting their enhancement experiments. What I found there, she paused, her jaw tightening. No one should have to see what they've done to those people. Marcus stepped forward slightly. Captain Blackwood contacted Prince Adrian 6 months ago. She's been providing intelligence about Drakmor's military capabilities and helping other kingdoms prepare defenses. And now, Sarah continued, I understand you're planning to face their enhanced soldiers directly. With respect, Your Highnesses, you have no idea what you're up against. Eleanor bristled at the woman's tone. Then, enlighten us. Sarah studied Eleanor with professional assessment. You're naturally enhanced, stronger, faster, more perceptive than normal humans. But Drakmor's modified soldiers don't feel pain, don't experience fear, and don't stop fighting until they're physically incapable of continuing. They're not human anymore, Princess. They're weapons. What are you suggesting? Adrian asked. I'm suggesting that unless you're prepared to kill without hesitation, you're going to lose, Sarah said flatly. Natural enhancement gives you advantages, but it doesn't eliminate your humanity. That humanity, your reluctance to inflict unnecessary harm, will get you killed when facing opponents who have no such limitations. Elena felt anger building in her system, the familiar energy beginning to coil in her muscles. You think I'm not capable of doing what needs to be done? I think you're capable of more than you realize, Sarah replied, but I also think you've never faced an enemy that's been designed specifically to counter your abilities. Show me, Eleanor said, stepping into the center of the clearing. Eleanor, Marcus began, but she held up a hand. If we're going to face these modified soldiers in 4 days, I need to know exactly what we're dealing with, Eleanor said. Captain Blackwood, you've fought them. Show me their capabilities. Sarah smiled grimly. Very well, Your Highness, but I should warn you, I've been enhanced as well. Not artificially like Drakmor's soldiers, but through training and exposure that's changed me in ways that can't be undone. Before Elena could ask what she meant, Sarah moved. The captain was fast. Not as fast as Elena's enhanced abilities allowed, but faster than any normal human should be. Her attack came in a carefully controlled strike, aimed at Elena's midsection, testing reflexes and reaction time. Elena flowed away from the attack easily, her enhanced speed making Sarah's movement seem almost sluggish. She countered with a gentle restraining hold, intending to demonstrate that she could control the situation without causing harm. Sarah broke the hold with a technique Elena had never seen before, using leverage and momentum in ways that seemed to defy physics. Then she pressed her attack, moving with relentless efficiency that reminded Elena uncomfortably of a machine. "Drakmor's soldiers fight like this," Sarah said as they engaged in the controlled combat dance. "No wasted motion, no hesitation, no consideration for their own safety." Elena began to understand what Sarah was demonstrating. The captain's attacks were precise and effective, but there was something missing: the intuitive flow that marked Elena's own enhanced abilities. Sarah fought like someone who had learned to be dangerous, rather than someone born to it. "The difference," Elena said, easily avoiding another calculated strike, "is that you still think like a human. You analyze, adapt, and improvise. The modified soldiers don't." "Correct," Sarah agreed, stepping back to end the demonstration. "But they also don't tire, don't get distracted, and don't feel the emotional connections that make you hesitate at critical moments." Elena considered this, her enhanced senses picking up the elevated heart rates and tension in her allies. "You're saying our humanity is both our strength and our vulnerability. I'm saying that when the modified soldiers attack during your wedding ceremony, they'll target the people you care about specifically to exploit that vulnerability," Sarah replied. "They'll force you to choose between protecting innocents and stopping their primary objectives." Marcus moved closer to Elena, and she felt the familiar calming effect of his presence. "What do you recommend?" "Preparation," Sarah said immediately. "Not just physical training, but psychological preparation for the kind of choices you'll have to make, and coordination between your enhanced abilities to maximize your advantages." Adrian nodded thoughtfully. "She's right. Elena, your abilities are powerful but untested in large-scale combat. My tracking and sensory abilities could provide tactical information, but I need to know you can act on that information without hesitation. And I need to know that you'll trust my strategic judgment, even when it means taking risks," Elena replied, understanding beginning to dawn. "We're not just allies, we need to function as a team." "More than that," Marcus said quietly. "In 4 days, when Drakmor's forces attack our wedding, we need to function as a single coordinated response. Any hesitation, any miscommunication, any moment of doubt will be exploited." Elena looked around at the faces of her allies, Marcus with his hidden skills and unwavering support, Adrian with his enhanced senses and intelligence network, Sarah with her hard-won knowledge of their enemy's capabilities. Each brought something essential to their cause, but success would depend on their ability to work together seamlessly. "Then we train," she decided. 4 days to become the team we need to be. "And to plan a wedding that doubles as a military operation," Marcus added with a wry smile. "The most important wedding in the history of 6 kingdoms," Adrian observed. "No pressure at all," Elena said, but she was smiling as she said it. For the first time since learning about Drakmor's enhanced soldiers, she felt confident about their chances. They had 4 days to prepare for a battle that would determine the future of their kingdoms. It would have to be enough. First Avi Petit Chapter 8, The Art of War. The War Council convened at dawn in the ancient oak grove, with maps and intelligence reports spread across portable tables that had been brought from the Border Inn. Elena stood at the center of the group, her enhanced vision allowing her to track multiple conversations and strategic discussions simultaneously while maintaining focus on the primary planning session. "Drakmor's forces have grown overnight," Adrian reported, his eyes slightly unfocused as he processed information from his enhanced senses. "I count at least 80 modified soldiers now, plus conventional forces, numbering around 200. Captain Sarah marked positions on the tactical map with grim efficiency. "The modified soldiers will be the primary assault force. They'll target the wedding party directly, while the conventional forces create chaos and prevent reinforcements from reaching us." Elena studied the positioning, her mind automatically calculating angles of attack and defensive possibilities. They're planning to strike during the ceremony itself. Maximum symbolic impact, maximum confusion among our forces, and maximum emotional trauma for the enhanced bloodlines, Marcus added grimly. "They want to trigger our protective instincts and force us into tactical errors. Which is why, Sarah continued, we need to separate the emotional aspects of this event from the military necessities. Princess Elena, when the attack begins, you cannot think of this as your wedding being disrupted. You must think of it as a battlefield where the enemy has chosen the time and place of engagement. Elena nodded, though she felt a tightness in her chest at the thought of their ceremony being transformed into a war zone. Understood. What about our guests? The other royals who will be attending? Queen Leanna of Westmarch will have her guard positioned as discreet security, Adrian replied. Prince Garrett of Ironhold is bringing weapons that will be distributed to our forces just before the ceremony, and there's been an unexpected development. Marcus looked up from the supply manifest he was reviewing. What kind of development? King Roderick and King Aldrich have been in communication with rulers beyond our immediate alliance, Adrian said with satisfaction. Apparently, word of our enhanced capabilities and Drakmor's modified soldiers has spread further than we anticipated. Eleanor felt a spark of hope. Additional allies. The mountain clans of Nordheim have sent a delegation, Adrian confirmed. Their bloodline enhancement is impressive, and the island kingdom of Maristos is sending their royal marines. Maristos? Sarah looked surprised. They've been neutral in continental politics for decades. Apparently, Drakmor's activities have threatened their trade routes, Marcus explained. Queen Cassandra decided that neutrality is no longer viable when enemies are actively working to destabilize the region. Eleanor felt the pieces of a larger strategy beginning to form in her mind. How many total enhanced individuals can we field? Adrian consulted his notes. Myself, the Nordheim delegation includes at least 3 enhanced warriors, and there are rumors that Prince Garrett of Ironhold has abilities beyond his metalworking gifts, possibly 7 or 8 enhanced individuals against 80 modified soldiers. Poor odds, Sarah observed. Not necessarily, Eleanor said thoughtfully. Sarah, you said the modified soldiers don't adapt or improvise. That means they'll follow predetermined attack patterns, correct? Generally, yes. They're given objectives and they pursue them with mechanical persistence. Elena moved to the tactical map, her enhanced vision allowing her to see the terrain features with perfect clarity. Then we use their predictability against them. Adrian, your tracking abilities, can you identify their planned approach routes? Already done, Adrian replied with satisfaction. They'll come from 3 directions. North through the dense forest, east along the main road, and south across the creek. The western approach is too steep for a coordinated assault. Perfect. Elena began marking positions on the map. We don't try to stop them from reaching the ceremony site. We let them come, then control where they engage us. Marcus studied her markings with growing understanding. You want to turn the wedding site itself into a trap. The oak grove provides natural channeling points, Elena explained. If we position our forces correctly, we can force their assault into predetermined kill zones where our enhanced abilities have maximum advantage. Sarah looked skeptical. That's a high-risk strategy, Princess. You're betting that we can control the flow of battle while protecting non-combatant guests. I'm betting that we're smarter than artificial soldiers who follow programmed responses, Elena replied confidently. But you're right about the risk to guests, which is why we need to modify the ceremony structure. She turned to Marcus. How attached are you to traditional wedding protocols? Marcus smiled. Given that we're planning to use our marriage ceremony as the opening move in a war against an international conspiracy, I think we can be flexible about tradition. Good, because I have an idea that will let us protect our guests while maximizing our tactical advantages. Elena looked around at her assembled allies, but it requires everyone to play their parts perfectly, and it requires absolute trust between the enhanced bloodlines. Explain, Adrian said simply. Elena moved to a clear section of ground and began sketching with a stick. We announced that the ceremony will take place in the center of the grove, under the ancient oak, but the actual wedding, the binding words and exchange of vows, happens here. She marked a position near the edge of the clearing. When the attack begins, the guests are already in defensive positions that we've disguised as ceremonial seating. A double deception, Marcus realized. Drakmor plans their assault on the false ceremony site while we're actually positioned for optimal defense. Exactly. And once the fighting begins, our enhanced individuals can work in coordinated teams instead of being scattered across a wide area trying to protect multiple targets. Sarah studied the sketch with professional interest. It could work, but it requires precise timing and flawless communication between your forces. Which brings us to the next phase of preparation, Elena said. We need to train as a unified team. Our enhanced abilities are powerful individually, but we need to learn how they work together. Adrian nodded. I can provide real-time intelligence about enemy positions and movements, but only if you can process and act on that information instantly. And I can handle strategic coordination, Marcus added, but only if everyone trusts my tactical decisions, even when they seem counterintuitive. The Nordheim delegation should arrive this afternoon, Elena continued. That gives us 3 days to integrate their abilities into our battle plan and rehearse the coordination until it's instinctive. Sarah rolled up the tactical maps with efficient movements. I'll work with your conventional forces on positioning and equipment. They need to understand that this won't be a typical battle. As the group began to disperse to their various preparations, Marcus caught Elena's arm gently. Elena, are you certain about this plan? Once we commit to using our wedding as a battlefield, there's no going back to the diplomatic solution. Elena looked up at him, feeling the familiar electric current flow between them. Marcus, 4 days ago I was worried about court politics and hiding my abilities. Now I'm planning to use those abilities to prevent a war that could devastate 6 kingdoms. I think going back stopped being an option the moment Drakmor decided we were too dangerous to live. Marcus studied her face for a long moment, then smiled with genuine warmth. Have I mentioned that I find your strategic mind incredibly attractive? Despite everything, the danger, the pressure, the weight of responsibility, Elena felt herself laugh. Save the romance for after we win the war, Your Highness. As you command, Your Extraordinariness. But Elena, Marcus's expression became serious again. Whatever happens during that ceremony, know that I consider myself the luckiest man in 6 kingdoms to be fighting beside you. Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks, but also a deep sense of certainty about the path they'd chosen. Together then, whatever comes. Together, Marcus agreed. As they walked back toward the border inn to begin the final preparations, Elena realized that her grandmother's warnings about the old gift had never mentioned its greatest power, not the enhanced abilities themselves, but the connections they could forge with others, who understood what it meant to be more than human. In 3 days she would either be married or dead, possibly both, but she would not be alone. Chapter 9. The Calm Before Thunder. The morning of the wedding dawned with unseasonable warmth, as if the ancient oak grove itself was blessing the union that would take place beneath its canopy. Elena stood at the window of her temporary chamber in the border inn, watching the final preparations unfold in the distance. Her enhanced vision allowed her to see every detail, the careful positioning of seemingly decorative elements that would serve as defensive barriers, the guests arriving in carriages that carried more guards than protocol typically required, and the subtle movements of Adrian's scouts as they maintained surveillance on the surrounding forests. Second thoughts? Marcus asked from behind her, his voice carrying the easy warmth that had become familiar over their brief but intense courtship. Eleanor turned to face him, noting that he was already dressed in his ceremonial uniform, deep blue velvet with silver threading that caught the morning light. The formal attire couldn't disguise the practical modifications he'd made: reinforced leather beneath the decorative fabric, concealed weapon attachments, and boots designed for combat rather than court ceremony. About the wedding or the battle? Elena asked, with a smile that felt surprisingly genuine given the circumstances. Both. Either? All of it? Marcus moved to stand beside her at the window, his shoulder brushing against hers. Eleanor, in the space of a week, we've gone from strangers to allies to partners planning to fight for our lives together. It would be perfectly reasonable to have doubts. Elena considered this, feeling the familiar electric current that flowed between them whenever they touched. Do you know what I realized this morning? What? That I've never felt more like myself than I have since meeting you. Eleanor turned to face him fully. For years, I've been hiding what I am, controlling my abilities, presenting a carefully constructed version of Eleanor that was acceptable to court and kingdom. But with you, especially during all of this chaos, I've been able to be completely honest about who and what I am. Marcus reached up to touch her face gently. And what you are, Eleanor of Valdoria, is extraordinary in every possible sense. Before Elena could respond, a soft knock interrupted them. Your Highnesses, came Mira's voice from outside the door. Prince Adrian requests your presence. The Nordheim delegation has arrived. Eleanor felt her heart rate increase, not from attraction this time, but from anticipation. The mountain clans of Nordheim were legendary for their fierce independence, and their unusual relationship with the natural world. If the stories were true, their enhanced bloodline was unlike anything the other kingdoms possessed. They found Adrian in the inn's common room, speaking in low tones with three individuals who immediately commanded attention. The Nordheim delegation consisted of 2 women and 1 man, all tall and lean, with the kind of weathered features that spoke of lives spent in harsh mountain conditions. But it was their eyes that marked them as different, pale blue-green irises that seemed to catch and reflect light in ways that suggested enhanced vision. "Your Highnesses," Adrian said as they approached, "may I present Thora Ironwill, Eric Stormcrow, and Ingrid Winterbane of the Nordheim mountain clans." The tallest of the women, Thora, stepped forward with fluid grace. "Princess Elena, Prince Marcus, the clans honor your invitation to witness your union and stand with you against those who would corrupt the old gifts." Elena noticed that Thora's voice carried harmonics that resonated in unexpected ways, almost like music. "Thank you for making the journey. We're grateful for your support." "Support implies charity," Eric interjected with a slight smile. "This is mutual necessity. Drakmor's activities threaten all who carry enhanced bloodlines. Better to face them together than be eliminated separately." "What abilities do your people possess?" Marcus asked directly. Ingrid answered, her voice carrying the same musical quality as Thora's. "Connection to the natural world. We can sense disturbances in the forest, communicate across great distances without words, and," she paused, glancing at her companions, "influence the behavior of wild creatures when necessary." Elena felt a thrill of excitement. "You can coordinate with the wildlife in the oak grove?" "If the situation requires it," Thora confirmed, "though such interventions come at a cost. The forest spirits do not appreciate being drawn into human conflicts." Adrian looked thoughtful. "The modified soldiers will be expecting to face enhanced humans. They won't be prepared for coordinated animal assistance." "Precisely," Eric said with satisfaction. "Drakmor's artificial enhancements focus on countering human abilities. They've given no thought to other forms of alliance." Sarah appeared from the direction of the stables, her expression grim but determined. "The final reconnaissance reports are in. Drakmor's forces are positioned exactly where we predicted. 87 modified soldiers, 200 conventional troops, and—" She paused, her jaw tightening. "At least 20 captured individuals who appear to be intended for some kind of demonstration." Eleanor felt ice in her veins. "What kind of demonstration?" "The intelligence suggests they plan to publicly execute prisoners as a warning to other kingdoms," Sarah replied. "Maximum psychological impact to accompany their assault on the wedding." The common room fell silent. Eleanor realized that their carefully planned defensive strategy had just become something more complex. They couldn't simply defend against Drakmor's attack. They needed to mount a rescue operation simultaneously. "Where are the prisoners being held?" Marcus asked. "Temporary camp, roughly half a mile north of the grove," Sarah replied. "Heavily guarded, but positioned to allow the prisoners to be brought to the wedding site quickly." Elena looked around at her assembled allies, feeling the weight of leadership settling on her shoulders. "We need to modify our battle plan. Adrian, can your people identify and track the prisoner transport route?" "Easily," Adrian confirmed. "But a rescue operation will divide our forces at the worst possible moment." "Not if we coordinate it properly," Elena said, her mind racing through tactical possibilities. "The Nordheim delegation's abilities give us options we didn't have before." Thora studied Elena with those unsettling pale eyes. "You have an idea, Princess." "I have a desperate plan that might work if everyone plays their part perfectly," Elena corrected. "But it requires us to trust abilities we've never used together in combat." "Explain," Marcus said simply. Elena moved to the large table where their maps were spread. "The modified soldiers will expect us to be focused entirely on defensive positions around the wedding site. They won't expect a coordinated rescue operation that uses enhanced abilities in combination." She began marking positions on the map. "Adrian, your people can track the prisoner transport and identify the exact moment they begin moving toward the grove. The Nordheim delegation can use their connection to local wildlife to create diversions and confusion among the guard force, and I can move fast enough to reach the prisoners and get them to safety before the main assault begins. That leaves the wedding site defended by conventional forces when the modified soldiers attack," Sarah pointed out. "No," Marcus said, understanding beginning to dawn in his expression. "It creates a two-front engagement where Drakmor's forces are responding to unexpected developments instead of executing their planned assault. Exactly, Elena confirmed. We turn their coordination against them. When the prisoner rescue begins, they'll have to decide whether to maintain their original attack timing or adapt to the new situation. Either choice creates opportunities for us. Eric smiled with something that looked like anticipation. The clans approve of strategies that force enemies to fight on our terms rather than their own. There's one more element, Elena continued. Marcus, during all of this, you still need to complete the actual wedding ceremony. Marcus stared at her. You want to get married in the middle of a battle? I want to get married because of the battle, Elena corrected. This alliance is bigger than just military cooperation. If we're going to convince other kingdoms to stand against Drakmor, they need to see that we're committed to each other, and to the cause beyond just temporary convenience. Thora nodded approvingly. The old ways understand such bindings. A union forged in the crucible of shared danger carries power that peaceful ceremonies cannot match. So, Marcus said slowly, while you're rescuing prisoners and fighting modified soldiers, I'm supposed to recite wedding vows. Elena smiled at him, feeling the electric current that connected them pulse with something deeper than mere attraction. You're supposed to marry me, Marcus of Astoria. Everything else is just the circumstances we've chosen to do it under. Marcus stared at her for a long moment, then threw back his head and laughed, genuine, delighted laughter that filled the common room with warmth. Elena of Valdoria, you are without question the most extraordinary woman I have ever met. Yes, I'll marry you in the middle of a battle. It seems fitting somehow. Adrian checked his timepiece. We have 4 hours until the ceremony begins. Final preparations? Elena looked around at the faces of her allies, people who had become family in the space of a few days, bound together by shared purpose and mutual trust. Final preparations, she agreed. And then we find out whether love really can conquer all. Even artificially enhanced super soldiers? Marcus asked with a grin. Especially artificially enhanced super soldiers, Elena replied confidently. As the group dispersed to make their last-minute arrangements, Elena realized that she had never felt more ready for anything in her life. In 4 hours, she would either be married or dead, quite possibly both. But she would face whatever came with the man she loved beside her, and allies who understood what it meant to be extraordinary. It would have to be enough. Jati Wandindarehama Chapter 10. Vows in the Storm. The ancient oak grove had been transformed into something between a fairy tale and a fortress. Silken banners in the colors of 6 kingdoms hung from the massive branches, while seemingly decorative flower arrangements concealed defensive positions and weapon caches. The guests, royalty, nobles, and dignitaries from across the region, took their seats on benches that had been positioned to provide both optimal viewing of the ceremony and clear lines of retreat if necessary. Elena stood in the shelter of the great oak, adjusting the circlet that would serve as her crown for the ceremony. Her wedding dress was a masterpiece of practical elegance, flowing white silk that concealed flexible armor beneath, with sleeves designed to allow full range of motion and boots that could transition from ceremonial to combat without missing a step. Most importantly, the dress had been designed with quick-release fastenings that would allow her to shed the formal elements in seconds if battle required it. You look beautiful, Mira said softly, making final adjustments to Eleanor's hair. And terrifying, it's quite an accomplishment. Eleanor smiled at her faithful lady-in-waiting. Are you ready for what comes next? I'm ready to see you married to a good man, Mira replied. Everything else is just excitement. Through the trees, Eleanor could hear the musicians beginning the processional music. Her enhanced senses picked up other sounds as well, the carefully controlled breathing of hidden guards, the distant movement of Adrian's scouts maintaining surveillance, and something else that made her heart rate spike. They're moving, she murmured, recognizing the coordinated footsteps of Drakmor's forces beginning their approach. Adrian materialized beside her with the silent grace that marked his enhanced bloodline. Prisoner transport began 5 minutes ago. 23 captives heavily guarded. They'll reach the grove approximately 10 minutes after the ceremony begins. Perfect timing, Eleanor replied grimly. And the modified soldiers? Holding position until the ceremony reaches the exchange of vows, Adrian confirmed. They want maximum symbolic impact for their assault. Then we give them exactly what they're expecting, Elena said, until we don't. Marcus appeared at the edge of the clearing, resplendent in his ceremonial uniform, with the silver wolf of Astoria gleaming on his chest. When he saw Eleanor, his expression shifted from focused determination to something softer and more personal. "My lords and ladies," he said quietly to their assembled allies, "you're about to witness either the most romantic wedding in history or the most catastrophic military operation ever attempted." "Why not both?" Elena replied, taking his offered arm. They walked together toward the ceremonial space, Eleanor's enhanced hearing tracking the whispered conversations of their guests. Queen Leanna of Westmarch was positioned near the front, her hand resting casually on what appeared to be a decorative sword, but was actually a fully functional weapon. Prince Garrett of Ironhold sat with his retinue, and Elena noticed that several of them carried musical instruments that were almost certainly not instruments at all. King Aldric and King Roderick stood together at the altar, both dressed in their finest robes, and both carrying themselves with the bearing of men prepared for war. As Elena and Marcus approached, she saw pride and concern warring in her father's expression. "Dearly beloved," King Aldric began, his voice carrying clearly across the assembled guests, "we gather in this ancient place to witness the union of two kingdoms and two hearts in marriage." Elena felt the familiar electric current flowing between her and Marcus, stronger now than it had ever been. As they faced each other before the altar, she realized that despite everything, the danger, the political complexities, the supernatural abilities, what she felt for this man was entirely real and entirely human. "Elena of Valdoria," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the tension she could see in his shoulders. "I take you as my wife, my partner, and my ally in all things. In peace and war, in joy and sorrow, in the ordinary moments and the extraordinary ones, I choose you." "Marcus of Astoria," Elena replied, her enhanced senses picking up the subtle sounds of movement in the forest around them. "I take you as my husband, my partner, and my ally in all things. Whatever we face together. Whatever we build as one." Through her enhanced hearing, Eleanor detected the approach of the prisoner transport. Still several minutes away, but moving steadily toward the grove, she also heard something else, the coordinated movement of Drakmor's assault force beginning their final approach. King Roderick stepped forward with the ceremonial rings. "These circles of gold represent the unbroken bond you forge today and the strength you draw from each other." As Marcus slipped the ring onto Elena's finger, she felt a pulse of energy that had nothing to do with her enhanced abilities and everything to do with the commitment they were making. When she placed his ring in return, she saw understanding pass between them, whatever came next. They would face it as truly married partners. "By the authority vested in me by the Crown of Astoria," King Roderick continued, "and with the blessing of the Crown of Valdoria, I pronounce you husband and wife, united in marriage and alliance. You may kiss your bride," King Aldric added with a smile that didn't quite mask his tension. As Marcus leaned down to kiss her, Eleanor heard Adrian's voice, pitched low but carrying clearly to her enhanced hearing. "Prisoners in sight. Modified soldiers beginning assault approach. Nordheim delegation confirms wildlife cooperation." The kiss was soft, sweet, and entirely too brief. As they separated, Elena looked into Marcus's eyes and saw the same determination she felt burning in her own chest. "Ready, wife?" he asked quietly. "Ready, husband," she confirmed. The sounds of approaching danger were growing louder now. The disciplined march of modified soldiers, the more chaotic movement of conventional forces, and underneath it all, the subtle rustling that suggested the forest itself was stirring in response to the Nordheim delegation's influence. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus said, his voice carrying across the assembled guests with surprising calm, "if you would please move to the positions your security details have prepared, we have some uninvited guests approaching." The transformation was remarkable. What had appeared to be an elegant wedding reception became a coordinated military operation in a matter of seconds. Guests moved to predetermined defensive positions with the efficiency of people who had been thoroughly briefed, while guards shed their ceremonial facades and revealed the professional soldiers underneath. Elena stepped behind the great oak and triggered the release mechanisms on her wedding dress, shedding the formal outer layer to reveal the flexible armor beneath. "Adrian, status report. Prisoners 2 minutes out, 20 guards. Modified soldiers approaching from 3 directions as predicted. Conventional forces attempting to surround the grove, but encountering resistance." Through the trees, Eleanor could hear the sounds of confusion and conflict as Drakmor's conventional forces discovered that the forest was actively working against them. The Nordheim delegation's influence was manifesting as coordinated animal attacks, wolves, bears, and even large birds disrupting formations and creating chaos in the enemy ranks. Thora, Eric, Ingrid, Elena called to the Nordheim representatives, can you maintain the wildlife coordination while providing direct support for the prisoner rescue? The forest spirits are enthusiastic about repelling invaders, Thora replied with satisfaction. We can maintain both efforts. Elena felt the dangerous energy building in her system, not from stress this time, but from anticipation and purpose. Then let's go get our people back. She moved toward the forest with inhuman speed, Adrian keeping pace beside her with his own enhanced abilities. Behind them, she could hear Marcus coordinating the defensive preparations with the calm authority of someone born to command. Eleanor, Marcus called after her, try not to do anything too heroic without me. No promises, she called back, disappearing into the forest with Adrian and the Nordheim delegation. The prisoner camp was exactly where Adrian's intelligence had indicated, a temporary facility designed for quick setup and rapid evacuation. Elena's enhanced vision allowed her to count the guards accurately, 18 conventional soldiers and 4 modified ones, all positioned to prevent escape rather than repel rescue attempts. The modified soldiers are the primary threat, Elena whispered to her team. I'll handle them directly. Adrian, can you and the Nordheim delegation manage the conventional guards? With pleasure, Eric replied, his pale eyes gleaming with anticipation. Elena moved into position, feeling her enhanced abilities reaching their peak as adrenaline and purpose combined. In the distance, she could hear the sounds of battle beginning at the wedding site as Drakmor's assault force met the coordinated resistance of 6 kingdoms' finest warriors. But here, in this moment, her focus was entirely on the people who needed her help. The old gift that her grandmother had taught her to hide was about to be used for its intended purpose, protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Elena smiled grimly and stepped into the clearing where the prisoners waited. The final battle for the future of 6 kingdoms was about to begin, and it started with a rescue.